Hello Guardians, it is Ebontis here and we are back a little later because yesterday the Traveler's Chosen launched. If you guys haven't seen my guide for that one, make sure you check it out. But we got more details about the third Stasis subclass called Revenant, and this is for the Hunters. Flavor text is, a second comma blade pierces the ice shelf. Biting whirlwinds erupt and tear at the frozen body. He catches a glimpse of the shadow in the Squall, rifle in hand. The hunt has ended. He shatters in the wind. So, always got to read the flavor text, just did it on the other two, so may as well on these as well. And we've got two pieces. Now, I will say the pictures on the website seem to be a little bit backwards, so disregard those. But the super is called Silence and Squall. Channel Stasis shards to form a deadly pair of comma blades. Throw the first blade towards enemies and freeze them in place. Follow it up with a second blade which detonates on impact and creates a stasis storm that hunts down stragglers. Now, this actually seems to be perfectly in line with what we saw briefly in the video. So the first one is going to be the throw that's going to freeze enemies in place, get a nice little stasis explosion to freeze everything. Second one is going to cause that little tornado-looking ice tornado. Not even ice, but it just looks like a little tornado. It's going to run around, either do impact to shatter or basically track down any enemies. And it does seem to actually track towards enemies. So a tracking super that has a storm and a throwing knife to it. It's kind of a cool mix of both Blade Barrage and something brand new. So it's a nice little balance in between. Don't mind the picture. This is for the melee. This is the picture for the two large kind of comma pickaxes we've got. And those are the ones that you'll be throwing. The melee, which is what you'll see here in the picture. It's kind of the three-sided ninja star shuriken. So it's called Withering Blade. Hurl sharp-edged shuriken into the fray. These stasis-powered projectiles bounce off multiple foes, damaging and slowing them. So, obviously we talked about this before. Stasis does seem to be around slowing, freezing, the shattering effects, priming and detonating. Kind of, we've seen that in other games previously. Overall, the Hunter seems to be very cool. And let's go to this other screen so I can show you why this one seems like it's going to be a little terrifying in PvP. So we get a little bit more detail for the Hunter Revenant. Revenants are a worthy ally in any battle. Summon the storm, use it for cover, lure enemies inside, then unleash devastation. So Silence and Squall, channeling stasis shards towards them. Revenants form comma blades and use them to unleash a lethal two-pronged attack. The first one is the Deadly Edge. Upon impact, the first blade shatters and sends out waves of stasis energy that freezes enemies around them. So it's actually a wave, sorry, not waves, a wave of stasis energy. Second is the Stasis Storm. A second blade hits creates a violent stasis storm that hones in on nearby enemies, slowing, damaging, and eventually freezing them as well. So it does sound like both of these are going to be freezing as opposed to doing the shattering. But on the other side, you may be able to either throw your Withering Blade, your melee, to kind of follow up the combo, or just shooting these enemies with your weapons once you've got the freezing effect in place. Should work either way. Withering Bleed. The Revenant throws razor-sharp stasis shurikens into the fray that ricochet off multiple enemies, same text as before. Now, for the Hunter, they state one of the most important parts of developing Stasis and its accompanying Guardian subclass has been in defining each of their fantasies. The team has spent a great deal of time iterating each subclass, starting with a fantasy that instantly summarizes the experience. In some cases, that comes with ease. For example, the fantasy shorthand for the Warlock Shadebinder was established early on as Ice Wizard. Makes sense from what we previously discussed. From that simple phrase, anyone could instantly conjure the image of their mind what it would be like to play a stasis-powered Warlock in Beyond Light. Other times, the fantasy evolves over the course of many discussions, iterations, and playtests. That was the case with the Hunter Revenant subclass, which we went through many iterations before it aligned on the Ninja archetype. The result is an amazing stasis experience that we can't wait for Hunter fans to try for themselves. Overall, again, it's kind of, as I said, you have the blend of a little bit of Blade Barrage with the throwing knives, of course, that's kind of a common thing. But you have the Isis shattering, the bouncing shurikens. It's got its own spin on it at least, but you can see a little bit of that. But the storm from the super, that's completely unique to almost like anything in the game. So that in and of itself is very, very cool. Is that early on we knew that the Hunter would embody the idea of slowing the battle around them with their stasis powers. This starts with the Withering Blade, the Hunter's Revenant melee attack. The player throws a deadly stasis shuriken in the fight. It ricochets off surfaces and enemies, slowing and damaging them along the way. Land two shuriken on the same target, and that enemy will be instantly frozen. So having double melee is going to serve you very well. When fully charged with ability energy, the Hunter Revenant can unleash their deadly super Silence and Squall, named after a pair of comma blades that the Hunter summons. The super involves a two-pronged attack with each combo blade having a different function. This first blade, when thrown, immediately detonates on impact, freezing enemies in a radius from the center of the blast. Hurl Squall, the second blade, it will embed itself into a surface or an enemy and then detonate, creating a stasis storm that will track nearby enemies, slowing and damaging them as it makes contact. So I don't know how the timing is going to work if you get to choose maybe with two buttons, like throw one, get the shatter, pick another group, and like send the storm over on them. I'm not sure how much control you're going to have. When you throw Blade Barrage, you know, it kind of goes one after the other in pretty quick succession. More just the timing of how much you can turn between the two throws. I wonder if they're going to give you a bit more control on this one. Would be kind of cool if they did, but we'll just have to see. As with the case with the Warlock Shadebinder and Titan Behemoth, players using the Hunter will have access to aspects and fragments, including, for example, a Hunter-specific slow dodge aspect that will allow Revenant to temporarily slow nearby enemies each time they perform a dodge. Hunters dodge a lot in PvP. Now, if you're going to slow me, and if you put, say, Gemini Jester with those and take away my radar as well, I'm just going to be a big sitting duck. So, Hunters dodging in PvP, I could imagine those of you who like to do this a lot, and especially if you're good at dodging near people just to screw with them, this is going to be pretty painful to deal with, but it is one of those that seems fairly cool. Another one we've got here is an aspect called Shatter Dive. Frozen Scream trapped in Gemstone. The recognition of a great and terrible truth. You descend upon your enemies with the enormity of the dark. Activate while midair to quickly descend and shatter nearby targets on impact. So it actually says while in air, hold, you know, say like PlayStation button, hold circle for a long period of time. You're actually going to quickly dive on enemies and shatter them from potentially distance. I don't know if you're going to be able to aim this thing directionally. Do they have to be frozen to be shattered? Would you freeze them if not? Or is it just kind of a melee bump if you come down? Not entirely sure how that will work specifically, but again, the shattering seems to be a big focus of this one. Finally, we've got a fragment we can see here as well. Gain a bonus to weapon damage after freezing a target with stasis. That's kind of awesome, actually. If you just freeze something with stasis, doesn't really matter what you freeze. Gain a bonus to weapon damage after freezing a target with stasis. Now, I don't know if it's specifically weapon damage, because, I mean, you're probably going to shatter them anyway, or if you just freeze something, like, you know, throw out your double melees and your weapons do more damage. Sounds kind of cool. So that definitely has potential. That's the only one we can really see here, though, for the fragments. And again, we've seen different screens where we can see two aspects on this screen right now, and there's only two fragments, you know, that are available. We've seen other ones that have three. So I'll be curious how much choice we get between aspects and fragments and how many we can equip and what the costs are, and all of that type of stuff is still a little bit unclear. Finally, they clarify about the grenades, and this is probably one of the more important parts because I've been waiting and mostly speculating about how this is going to work. Apart from their intrinsic stasis abilities that will be part of each subclass, all Guardian classes using stasis will have their choice of a variety of stasis grenades to use in combat. So all classes get all grenades. So you have the Glacier Grenade. Upon contact with the ground, a wall of stasis crystals instantly burst up from the earth, and nearby enemies are frozen inside stasis crystals. They're actually frozen in stasis, and it builds like the stasis wall. These grenades have multiple uses, from encasing enemies to creating cover. When destroying the crystals will create AoE burst damage to nearby enemies as well. So there's a benefit to actually breaking your wall, or if the enemies are too close and they shoot them, they break stasis. It's just going everywhere. So that one actually seems pretty cool, but the wall, outside of the fact of making cover, does also have the freezing, encasing in stasis, and then the AoE explosion afterwards. Pretty useful, it sounds like. Second, we've got the Cold Snap Grenade. Upon impact with the ground or an enemy, this grenade unleashes a wave of stasis energy that races along the ground in the direction of the closest nearby enemy. So it actually does sound like it's going to track, freezing them and searching out the next nearby foe. You can freeze up to 3 enemies with a single Cold Snap Grenade. So it kind of seems to travel like an Arc Bolt grenade potentially would. Throw it, and on impact, it's going to track out 3. Not sure how fast it's going to travel along the ground, if you'll have like ability to get out of the way or just kind of roll with what's there. Either way, you know, 3 tracking, freezing ability, still pretty good overall. That one's just one more for, you know, specifically getting certain enemies and cover that aren't in the same line. Overall, Cold Snap Grenade, probably like a Stasis Arc Bolt Grenade is what I would describe that as. Dark Field Grenade creates powerful stasis fields that suck enemies into them when forming. Once an enemy is caught inside, they will be slowed. So for one, you're pulled to the inside of the Dark Field Grenade. Pulled to the inside, you will be slowed, and if unable to make it out in time, you will be frozen in place. So, sucked inside, harder to get away, slowed, and then frozen in place. Again, the sitting duck like stuff in PvP that I'm sure you're gonna see is like people just frozen. Take your time, aim that sniper shot, bam! Should be interesting to watch. All three of the grenade abilities show the potential of Stasis to change the way you fight in Beyond Light. Slowing and freezing enemies have obvious advantages, and we put a lot of effort into thinking about how Stasis affects combat in both PvE and PvP. That arc bolt grenade to reach around a corner, a couple people on a control point with the, like, you know, gravity field Stasis grenade. Yeah, I can see PvP getting a little crazy. The ability to create new geometry with Stasis is also an exciting new addition. With a well-timed Glacier grenade, you can now create Stasis crystal formations that can perform double duty as platforms. Players are going to use this new power. Take, for example, Armamentarium for Titans, double grenades, there we go. Be it in the form of a grenade or a super to gain easier access to tough-to-reach areas, create new lines of sight, or even do things we could never predict. So basically what they're saying is they're waiting for the game to be broken. They know it's going to be, just give it time. Wielding Stasis is going to be an unprecedented change to Destiny 2. This is a new take on elemental power, where the path to victory is found through controlling the enemy and the pace of the fight, instead of through brute force and damage. With aspects and fragments, we're also giving players a new level of control over how they customize their Stasis experience. I hope they go very deep into the aspects and the fragments. I hope they're not, like, you know, aspects and fragments like beta version. I really hope there's quite a few options. Some are fairly impactful, and, you know, there's a decent amount of true feel of customization, because if it's just very obvious that this is the best way to go for Stasis for the hunters, period, it's not going to get that creative after a little while. So again, the balancing is going to be a key thing to make sure all options feel viable, and you can hopefully choose what works best for you. But that's basically it for the Hunter Revenant, and we finally get to see the grenades explained, which is a good thing. So thank you guys for tuning into this one. Yesterday, as I said, the Traveler's Chosen quest is finishable, so I've got that full guide up there. Tune in, check that one out if you guys haven't seen that one before. So subscribe to my channel and hit that alert bell if you haven't yet. Of course, you guys know we'll be covering as much Destiny 2 stuff as we have to cover. And of course, you'll also find me on Twitch and Twitter covering anything from GPUs and CPUs with, you know, NVIDIA 3000 and RDNA and Ryzen chips coming up. We've got the new consoles, and also on Twitch, where I could be streaming who knows what. Twitch.tv/Ebontis and Twitter.com/Ebontis. Thank you guys very much for the support. You guys are all amazing. I'll see you soon. Have a good one.